Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. On Bottom Line, we bring you the best of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Ashim Kumar, and we're going to start in today's episode with a focus on the economic consequences of the US strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. As oil prices surged immediately, Iran's threat to close the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point for 20% of global oil, could further reshape global markets by disrupting supply chains. How might this volatile situation affect Poland, Ukraine, as well as the rest of Europe in general? More in Jan Kennedy's feature report.
Oil prices surged on Monday morning after the US attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. At one point, the price of benchmark Brent crude rose to the highest level since January. However, prices later eased and markets overall reacted with relative calm.
Most investors are relatively relaxed about the situation and their assessment of the situation. Only if there is a dramatic increase in the level of escalation, a dramatic expansion of the conflict, would the stock markets comment on this with sell-offs.
But one potential decision, however, could turn the market on its head. In response to the attack, the Iranian parliament voted and approved plans to close the Strait of Hormuz, pending approval from the country's Security Council for the first time ever. Located between Iran and Oman, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important oil shipping routes in the world. About 20% of global oil passes through it. If it gets blocked, the ripple effects could send oil prices up to triple digits.
If it will be conducted by Iran, it will probably launch the prices of oil to the level we haven't seen for a long time. I believe it may even reach the level of $100 for a barrel for Brent. But right now it's only a scenario, a black scenario, I would say.
A scenario which would also affect Poland and other countries in the region.
We will also receive some higher costs of our fuel. Not a massive, I believe, right now. But if the Hormuz will be blocked, it will be much more dangerous also for the Polish market, I believe.
With fears of global instability mounting, officials from Europe and beyond are calling for de-escalation.
Ministers are very much focused on the diplomatic solution and also the concerns of retaliation and this war escalating are huge. Especially closing of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran is something that it would be extremely dangerous and not good for anybody.
China calls on all parties to step up efforts to de-escalate tensions and prevent regional turmoil that could have a greater impact on global economic development.
The matter is of massive importance for Asia and its biggest economy. China would be especially susceptible to a supply disruption, but the ripple effect would spill over to the global market.
The world is a connected system, so when there's missing of oil in Asia, you have to find it somewhere else, and it makes the oil prices on the whole globe much more expensive.
The world is holding its breath, hopeful that an oil crisis can be averted.
And now joining us to dig further into the possible consequences of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is Wojciech Jakubek, energy analyst at the Energy Security Center. Wojciech, welcome and thank you for taking the time. Good to have you back. Okay, so tell us, talk us through what happened to oil prices after the US struck Iran's nuclear facilities.
So what happened is really interesting because at the beginning the prices went up and they reached almost $80 per barrel of Brent. Also the Urals Russian grade was more expensive. But then somewhere at the beginning of 23rd of June, the prices went down. And as I look just right now on the oil prices, the Brent is priced at $74 per barrel, like the oil was not expecting some major escalation. We've had a visit from Iranian foreign minister in Russia today. There was no big announcement about Russian support for Iran. China is also asking for the escalation. We don't see a big escalation that would lead to increased pressure on oil prices yet. It doesn't mean that nothing will happen, because we also hear about evacuation from the embassies, from the places that could be hurt by some Iranian retaliation. But in general, the market is looking steady at the situation, and we don't see the oil price rising. It is going down for now.
Well, that's the way it seems at the moment. But the Iranian parliament, of course, has approved the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This needs to be confirmed by the supreme body in Iran. Now, that would make a difference, and not only to the price of oil. What is the likely impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz to be?
Yeah, there is no decision yet. There is no physical obstacle to oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz. But if we have an incident, there is a question of the scale of this incident. Do we have some random attacks like it was with the Red Sea and Houthis last year? Do we have some systemic blockade from Iranian side? Can Iranians sustain such blockade? And what would be the reaction from the US, which is threatening with some measures that could be taken in case of such blockade? We don't know all of that. So depending on the scale, we could expect the prices to go up, because up to 20% of seaborne oil export is going through the Strait of Hormuz. It is important to underline that most of Iranian oil is going to China, which is an important issue when it comes to politics. And we also have like 1/3 of LNG supplies that are going through Hormuz to the worldwide market. So it is important from the point of view of Qatari supplies, for example, which are delivered to Poland and many other places around the globe.
So it doesn't sound as though closing the Strait of Hormuz would be particularly popular with Qatar, with China, or in fact would be good for Iran itself. However, Iran is insisting that that option is still on the table. Do you think they'll carry it out?
Well, it would be an act of being desperate. It could be a way to do something about a bad situation that Tehran is in, but there are multiple tools to be used by the international community to handle such crisis. But the very threat of such blockade is increasing the costs of transport through the Hormuz Strait. It is increasing the prices of insurance, the prices of freight. So we could see the similar effect like it was with the Red Sea last year and the Houthis terrorist attacks, that the prices will go up. Already in on Polish petrol station, we see a change in trend and the prices are going up. So the result, which is already to be seen, is a more expensive fuel and more expensive economy.
So, I mean, this is only on the threat that the straits might be closed. We see prices at the oil pumps going up. Now, look, this is the second energy shock for Europe in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, of course, first we had the transportation of Russian gas through Europe, which Europe has weaned itself off. And now we're hit with increasing oil prices. Is there a lesson for Europe here, and Poland in particular, to be learned going forward?
Mm. So we are not being hit yet with a factual, actual closing of the Hormuz Strait. It is only a possibility, which is increasing the risk and is increasing the prices on the fuel market. But we have the same lesson like it was in 2021 when Russia started the energy crisis. We need to diversify away from the status quo powers like Russia, like Iran, like the Middle East, but we also need to diversify our technologies. The energy transition is a part of solution. Of course, secure energy transition backed up, for example, by nuclear power. And that is why the Polish government is looking for a nuclear power plants in two places in Poland, because we need to have a stable energy transition only because of our dependence on fossil fuels. No matter about diversification, the exposition to turbulent fuel markets is making it less secure to depend fully on fossil fuels in general.
Yes, but fossil fuels, I mean, they're not only used for heating and for energy in industry, they're also used to transport goods, logistics. And there's very little you can do to diversify away that cost. So can we expect the prices in the supermarkets to go up as a result of this?
Of course, another crisis is another inflationary pressure, and we could see some results in basic goods prices sometime in future, depending on the scale of the crisis. But it's always not good for the business to have another war somewhere around the globe. So it is good to look for alternatives to secure the transatlantic cooperation when it comes to hydrocarbons, because in the end, no matter about the quarrels between Europe and US, it is our common interest to increase the hydrocarbon trade between both sides of Atlantic Ocean. And this crisis is another way of reminding us of that.
So you're suggesting a closer energy ties between the US and Europe. Is that correct?
Obviously, because increasing production of hydrocarbons in US is speeding up the American economy, and the decrease of hydrocarbon prices on European market is a way to speed up our economy. So it is a win-win scenario because we are removing dependence from Russia. We are not looking so much at the situation in Middle East, and we are making money together. So even the most pro-Trumpist government is looking at this scenario, and it is a win-win scenario.
Understood. Now, you mentioned Russia. Now, oil prices are going to help Russia fund its war, and an increase in those prices is going to give it even more funds. Is that what we expect to see? Do we expect Russia to suddenly raise the tempo of its attacks on Ukraine as a result of these oil price increases?
So Iranian conflict has a multidimensional effect on Russian invasion in Ukraine. First of all, it is a distraction for the Western forces. We need to think about two different conflicts at the same time. We need to split what we got to handle those conflicts. It's not a good way of limiting the effect of war. So from this point of view, it is useful for Kremlin. The increased oil price is always good for the petrostate, and Russia is a petrostate, a country addicted to hydrocarbon export revenues. But in longer term, depending on the results of this confrontation, it could also hit Russian interest in Ukraine, because Iran was one of the powers that were providing Russia with different goods in times of Western sanctions, including drones. Shahid drones are produced in Iran. The other thing is that Iran was an important ally of Russia in the Middle East. So losing such an ally in case of some regime change would also hit Russian interests. So we are not ready yet to assess accordingly the situation, because we don't know what will be the follow-up of this situation. Is the nuclear program in Iran done? Is America done with its involvement? What will happen next? We don't know, and that is why the market is not sure and the oil price is not secure.
Understood. Now, one of the other, of course, elements of Russia's income is the use of the shadow fleets to circumvent sanctions. Now, if the Straits of Hormuz are closed, it's going to be pretty difficult even for those ships to get away from Russia and out into the open marketplace and sell Russian oil, isn't it?
Well, to some extent, of course, limiting the trade using the Hormuz Strait will also limit the capability of different players to manage the oil supplies. Also, the Russian side, depending on the instruments they are using. To some extent, the Russian Ghost Fleet is an imitation of Iranian Ghost Fleet that is being used since like 20 years of Western sanctions. So it could be an impact on the supplies. It is another argument against the blockade because no one is interested in such blockade, even Russia and China. So Iran is staying on its own with this initiative. We don't know what Tehran will do, but in general, a decrease in Iranian oil export is a gain for its competition like Saudi Arabia and also Russia. It needs to be reminded that Iranian comeback to the oil market that is to be seen since the Biden administration is a threat to Russian position in the Asian market, especially in China. And we see a growing competition between Russia, Saudi Arabia, and also Iran when it comes to Chinese markets. So it is a big, complicated topic.
Do you think, in the last minute or so that we have left, Jakub, do you think that China has a role to play in influencing Iran and what it does, given what you've just said about its reliance on Iranian oil?
So looking at Russian inertia, China is the last big power to make US reconsider what they are doing in Iran. And from what we hear from Xinhua agency, China is also looking for the escalation. So everyone is looking for a de-escalation now. Only some black swan coming from nowhere could change this direction. And maybe that is why the oil price is going down, not going up.
Understood. Well, as I see, or as we all see now, and thank you for laying that out, lots and lots of moving pieces, and a lot more information is needed before we can start to draw any conclusions. I hope that you will come and see us again soon. Thank you very much.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the bottom line for today. I was your host, Ashim Kumar. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5:10 CET on TVP World. In the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. For more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World. Goodbye.